It's strange to think that of all things, a Nickelodeon movie, such as Clockstoppers, was directed by Jonathan Frakes, best known for his role on Star Trek The Next Generation as Will Riker, and for directing some of those movies as well. So, aside from that, though, there are other interesting things about this movie, and I've talked about it a bit before. Before I get into my opinion, so you know that I have a positive thought process on it, before I get into that, here's the plot. Zach Gibbs, played by Jesse Bradford, is a teenager hoping to buy a car. He's been collecting the money, but unfortunately, because of miscommunication with his father, a college professor of science, he's unable to get the car before his dad goes out on a business trip. He ends up finding a watch in a box in the basement among his father's stuff. However, when it accidentally falls out of the box it's in, but does not realize that the watch is the creation of a company called QT. The head of the company, played by Henry Gates, played by Michael Biehn, is seeking to use a thing called hypertime, the technology that the watch involves, in order to try to own it himself and not simply hand it over to the NSA as was originally planned. He's instructed scientist Earl Doppler, played by French Stewart, to be the one who handles the perfection of the experiment. Thus, as a result, he ages. The reason being, well, because when Zach pushes the button on the watch, he ends up moving to an incredibly super fast speed, to the point that everything else looks like it is frozen where it is. He uses this at first to impress the new Venezuelan girl who starts going to a school named Francesca, played by Paula Garcés. But then they find themselves in jeopardy when Gates is sending men after them as well as Zach's father, in order to try to get the technology back and keep anybody who gets in his way from, well, getting in his way. Can Zach rescue his father? Can he convince Doppler to help him do it? So, yeah, this movie, I think maybe because of the fact that it has Nickelodeon behind it. I mean, Albie Hecht and Julia Pistor, they were producers on Nickelodeon for a very long time. You get an old-fashioned vibe from them for that, and I think you also get a scientific and serious vibe from the movie because of Jonathan Frakes being the director. That said, though, there is some comedy in the film. The movie does rely heavily on a lot of comedy related to teen drama, and there are moments where that works. I've heard since then that the scientific ideas in the film are actually not that as impressive as I originally expected, but at the same time, the concepts are still interesting and entertaining enough on their own that they managed to make it interesting. I mean, the idea that, and not to mention the fact, although at the same time I can't help but wonder about the fact, Clockstoppers, they're not actually stopping the clock, they're just making time go slower, extremely slower. Actually, rather, they're not even affecting time itself. They're being the ones affected because they're the ones using the watch to move at such an accelerated rate that they aren't moving at the same speed in any way whatsoever as everything else around them, and thus everything else around them looks like it's stopped. So, and yeah, that's a little complicated for a child to understand, but at the same time, it's simplified enough that a child could understand it. So, another thing I notice about the movie is, yeah, for a kid's film, this is some surprisingly adult stuff in it. And I'm not just talking the serious elements with the thriller and the espionage, but you have it made to a point that there is a sexual attraction being centered around Francesca. I mean, you have a scene where she almost takes off her shirt in her room until she realizes Zach is hiding in there. Another point where she exits a bathroom dressed in a towel, and French Stewart, as Doppler, is looking at her like he's attracted to her. I realize he's supposed to be playing a character who's younger than he actually is, but at the same time, it's kind of surprising that Nickelodeon actually got away with this stuff, that they actually pushed the envelope with this stuff. Anyway, the performances in the movie are good. I mean, Fred Stewart, he is kind of yucking it up, but at the same time, playing it to a level of calmness that you would not anticipate. Michael Biehn, he is going over the top, but at the same time, he is still menacing as the villain. And, yeah, I think that Jesse Bradford and Paula Garcés, being that they're the romantic leads and that they have the most interactions of anyone in the film, it's for that reason that they have to carry a lot of the film on their own, and they make it work. They have good chemistry. I like these characters. I like their relationship. So, is this by any stretch of the imagination one of Nickelodeon's better films? No, it is not. But at the same time, there is a level of somewhat guilty pleasure aspects to it that make it entertaining to watch and make it entertaining to sit through. You understand that this is not a perfect film by any stretch of the imagination, and you understand that technically it may not be a good movie, but I think it's certainly one that's worth giving your time to.